The night we forgot how to sleep. There is something terrifying about watching the night stretch endlessly before you, hour after hour, knowing your body is tired, but your mind refuses to surrender. You lie in darkness, and yet you are flooded with noise, memories, worries, regrets, plans. The ceiling becomes a screen where all your unresolved thoughts are projected. And then the clock strikes 3. Again, and again, and again. What if I told you that the inability to sleep is not a random curse of aging, but a silent message from within? What if your insomnia is not just about melatonin or hormones, but about a deeper wound, a forgetting, a disconnection, a war that has never truly ended inside you? Welcome to Buddha Story. Today's journey is not about a quick fix. It is about remembering something ancient, a ritual that is not about religion or belief, but about healing, about touching your own body in a way that tells your nervous system, you are safe. You can let go now. But first, let me ask you something that may sound impossible. Can you imagine a former general, once a ruthless, respected war hero, curled up on a stone floor in a forest, whispering into the night, "Peace at last, peace"? Not because the world around him changed, but because something inside him finally softened. This is not fiction. This was General Soman, a powerful commander turned monk. When he gave up the sword and shaved his head, people mocked him. How could a man who once ordered thousands to battle now sit quietly under a tree? And yet, under that same tree, he slept like a child. Someone once asked him, "Why do you look happier now than when you were a leader?" Soman smiled and said, "Because I finally laid down the heaviest burden of all, the self I thought I had to be." This is the secret. Sleep is not only about resting the body. It is about releasing the self that clings, controls, and resists. If this message touches something inside you, I invite you to stay with us until the end. You may discover that the thing you have been searching for in pills, therapists, and midnight walks has been hidden within your breath, your fingertips, and your presence all along. And if this journey speaks to your heart, please consider subscribing to Buddha Story. It helps us bring more meaningful content to you and others who may need this light. Let me now bring you back to a common scene. An elderly woman, once a school teacher, now widowed and alone, sits at the edge of her bed. Every night she takes her medication, turns off the lamp, and prays for sleep to find her. But sleep has grown cruel. It teases her with drowsiness, only to abandon her in the hollow hours of night. She blames age. She tells herself it is normal. The doctor agrees. So do her friends. But I disagree. From what I have seen, sleeplessness after 60 is not simply part of getting older. It is often the body's final protest, a sacred refusal to ignore unresolved sorrow, tension, and unfinished business. In Buddhist teaching, we speak of samskara, mental imprints that dwell not only in the mind but in the body. These imprints, these energies, are not erased by time. They linger in the muscles, in the breath, in the very rhythm of your nervous system. And when we lie down to sleep, with no distractions left to hold them back, they rise. So yes, age brings change. Melatonin levels fall, circadian rhythm stutters. The body becomes more sensitive to pain, digestion, temperature. But these are not the true barriers to sleep. The deeper barriers are the inner barriers. And that is why, despite all the noise-canceling machines, weighted blankets, herbal teas, and prescription pills, millions still wake up feeling unrested. Because rest is not just something you give the body, it is something you give the soul. There is a forgotten ritual, simple, soft, and profound, that speaks directly to the soul. And it involves no drugs, no machines, no beliefs, only your breath, your awareness, and 3 sacred points on your body. One evening, a student came to me and said, "I would give anything to sleep the way I did as a child." I looked at him and asked, "What did you have back then that you have now forgotten?" He thought for a long time. Then he whispered, "I trusted." This is what trauma, aging, and life's countless storms steal from us. Trust in our own body, our own mind, our own rhythm. But trust can be rebuilt, and it starts with the smallest gestures. The ancient practice I will guide you through in the next chapter is not superstition. It is supported by both Eastern wisdom and modern neuroscience. It activates the parasympathetic nervous system, the body's natural gateway to rest and healing. It helps your breath slow down, your heart relax, your muscles soften, and more importantly, it creates a message sent from your conscious self to the deeper parts of your being. I am here. I am listening. I am safe. This ritual, this tapping of 3 points, becomes a kind of prayer, not to a God above, but to the temple within. And for many who have felt abandoned by rest, this gentle act becomes the bridge back home. Let me leave you with one final story before we move forward. In the mountains of northern India, there lived a silent monk named Anura. He had taken a vow of silence for over 20 years. People visited him not to hear him speak, but to feel the peace that radiated from his presence. One night, a traveler stayed nearby. He asked Anura's attendant, "How does he sleep so peacefully without ever speaking, without ever expressing himself?" The attendant replied, "Because he no longer debates with himself." To sleep deeply, we must stop arguing with reality. We must stop carrying the weight of everything we think we need to control. Anura found silence not just in words, but in the very space of his body and mind. So must we. Now I ask you, which do you think causes deeper sleep disturbances after the age of 60? A. Biological changes in hormones and metabolism. B. Emotional tension and mental attachment accumulated over the years. Type your answer below in the comments, A or B. We would love to hear your thoughts and open a conversation within this community. The ritual that whispers the body back to sleep. It is easy to underestimate the intelligence of the body. We often think of healing as something that happens in hospitals, under fluorescent lights, with someone else holding the solution. But in truth, the body holds ancient wisdom, quietly stored in nerves, breath, and skin. The problem is not that we are broken. It is that we have forgotten how to listen. There is an old saying in the East, the body is the first temple, the breath is its incense, and the mind is its altar. When these three are in harmony, peace arrives naturally, like sleep arriving to a child's evening. And so, for those whose sleep has been taken, not by choice but by the quiet erosion of trust in their own bodies, there is a path back. Not a complicated one, not a commercial one, a human one. A gentle ritual that involves nothing more than the tips of your fingers, the rhythm of your breath, and the sincerity of your presence. This is the 3-point practice, a ritual that is both deeply modern and ancient, both scientifically sound and spiritually profound. It requires no tools, no dogma, only a willingness to be kind to your own nervous system. The first point is located just above the space between your eyebrows. In some traditions, this is known as the third eye. In neuroscience, it sits close to the prefrontal cortex, the part of the brain that governs thinking, planning, self-reflection. It is also the place where worry tends to fester. When this area is overstimulated, as it often is in older adults who lie in bed replaying their lives or worrying about what is to come, sleep becomes almost impossible. To gently tap this area is not just a mechanical act. It is a kind of sacred pause, a moment of saying, "You have thought enough for today. You may rest." The tapping should be light, rhythmic, like rain falling gently on a still pond. Not so soft it is absent, not so hard it distracts. Steady, calm, connected. As you do this, breathe in slowly through your nose. Count to 4, hold for a moment, then exhale through your mouth for a count of 6. Repeat. Feel how the tapping and the breathing begin to dance together, creating a soft rhythm that tells your mind it is safe to soften. There was once a man named Elias. He had spent decades as an accountant, sharp, precise, always calculating. After retirement, his mind did not retire. He lay awake each night, calculating imaginary outcomes. What if I had moved to the coast? What if I had chosen not to sell that property? What if I had been a better father? He tried pills, meditation apps, podcasts. Nothing silenced the mental math. But then one evening, guided by a student of somatic healing, he began the practice. At first, he tapped with skepticism. Then he added breath. After a few nights, something began to shift. Not overnight, but gently, like a frost melting into spring. "It is as if I am pressing a mute button," he told me once, "not on my life, but on the noise about it." This is not magic. It is nervous system regulation. The second point rests on both temples. These are fragile places where the skull is thin and the blood vessels plentiful. They are also places where pressure gathers, tension headaches, eye strain, the dull ache that sits like a fog across the forehead. All of these signal an overactive sensory system. The modern world floods us with input, but the aging mind does not filter noise as well as it once did. The temples become overburdened gates, pulsing with quiet resistance. Tapping both temples simultaneously, gently, becomes a way of releasing that burden. It is like knocking softly on two doors and telling them, you may close for the night. The rhythm again matters. Consistency over force. A kindness of movement. This is also where touch becomes memory. If done regularly, the body begins to associate this tapping with safety. It becomes a cue like a lullaby or the dimming of lights. Over time, the body responds faster, the mind releases sooner, the heart rate slows on its own. There was a woman named Marianne. She had been a librarian for 40 years. Her memory was sharp, but her nights were frayed. She described her head as a box full of bees. When she began the temple tapping, she cried. Not from pain, but because, in her words, no one had touched me kindly in years, not even myself. Do not underestimate this. The body longs for kindness, especially from its own hands. The final point is the base of the skull where it meets the neck. This is perhaps the most neglected place on the human body. We carry our burdens here. Financial strain, unspoken guilt, the pressure of being strong for others. This is where the weight of uncried tears and unprocessed memories rests. And yet, we rarely tend to it. To tap here is to acknowledge the labor of the self, the lifetime of endurance stored in these muscles. The tap should move gently from left to right, tracing the base of the skull like a bridge. You may use 2 fingers or 3. What matters is rhythm, breath, and softness. One monk I met in Sri Lanka told me that every night before sleep, he would tap this area and whisper, I forgive. Forgiveness, he said, was not always about others. Sometimes it was about letting go of the need to carry everything one more night. You may wish to do the same. As you tap, breathe deeply. With each exhale, imagine letting go of one unseen burden. Not solving it, just letting it rest for a while. When the 3 points are tapped in sequence, a quiet symphony emerges. The forehead settles the mind. The temples ease the senses. The neck dissolves the armor. Together they open a door. Not just to sleep, but to self-trust. This practice becomes even more powerful when paired with a small nightly ritual. Warm water with a spoonful of honey, for example, can help produce serotonin, the chemical precursor to melatonin, the sleep hormone. It is not the sweetness that heals, but the intention. Do not underestimate ritual. In an age of distraction, ritual is rebellion. A way of saying, I will return to myself even for 5 minutes. Over time, this 3-point tapping becomes a kind of signal fire, a gentle ritual that reminds the body what it already knows but has forgotten in the noise, how to surrender. Remember this, healing does not always look like doing. Sometimes it looks like tapping, breathing, trusting, choosing softness over control. In the silence that follows, sleep does not need to be forced. It arrives, not because we demanded it, but because we made space for it. And in that space, something even deeper than sleep may awaken. Peace, wholeness, presence. May you remember it. May you return to it. Night after night, breath after breath, tap after tap.